Well, good day, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you are watching this session. Welcome to the CET Experience Developer session. That is a preview of the Configura Visual Studio Code integration. So first off, I just want to express how excited I am for this integration. This, I think, says a lot about what should be coming in the future from Configura as far as, development tools, things like that. And I think that this is an amazing first step. And again, I'm just very excited for this. So I hope everybody else is as excited as I am and my team is to get access to this tool to start using it. And again, just continue to say I'm really excited for this. All right. So now let's get down to it here and start talking about what this integration means. All right, just kidding. I just wanted one more image here to show you how excited I am. So first off, I want to talk a little bit about myself. My name is Tyler Lamb, and I've been working in CET and CM for almost 7 years now, which is kind of crazy to think. I've been working with the company called HNI on our extension, and I've mainly had most of my efforts focused on the All Steel brand for HNI. When I started working in CET at about the end of the year 2015. Some of you may recognize me from the work that I've done on the initial VS Code CM integration that was created. That was created by me and my team around early 2016, and then our team has been using exclusively to develop in since that point. Or you may recognize me from some previous sessions, such as I did a session on electrical a few years back. And many years ago, I actually did a session previewing our original VS Code integration that was created by our team. And last year, I did a session about the task scheduler in CET. So this is not my first rodeo, to say the least. So then I thought it would be fun to play a little game quick here, just kind of get to know me a little bit more, because I feel like sometimes these sessions, people get up here and they talk for a while, and then you don't really remember them. So I just want to do something silly to hopefully help you remember me a little bit more. So we're going to play a little game called Three Truths and a Lie. And I got a little carried away, so there's more than three truths here. But so the three facts, or I'm sorry, there's going to be 4 facts and 1 lie up here on the screen. So the first fact or lie is that I own a tractor. The next one is I have 16 gigabytes of RAM in my gaming PC. The next one is I always back my car into the garage like a boss. My Steam library has exactly 153 games, and I created a Discord bot for a mobile game that I play. So I'll give everybody here a couple seconds to maybe think about which one they think that the lie might be. And so now I'm going to reveal what's coming here. So here's the truths. I do, in fact, own a tractor. You may look at yourself and say that's just the lawnmower, Tyler. But if you look on John Deere's website, it's classified as a long tractor. So take that. And here's a screenshot from the Discord bot that I have made for my mobile game that I play. Here's a screenshot confirming the number of titles in my Steam library. And finally, here's a picture of my gaming PC. I thought that'd be more fun than just a picture of the task manager showing how much RAM I have, but I do in fact have 16 gigabytes of RAM. I do not always back my car into the garage. All right, so now let's get down to it here. So again, I want to kind of talk about the history of kind of using Visual Studio Code for CET development. So when our team first started our adventure in CET, I think it was in December of 2015, and we went up to Grand Rapids to do our training. And most of our team had lots of prior development experience, working, doing a lot of web development or various other tasks. So very familiar with a lot of Visual Studio and those types of editors. And so the first day of training, we were all kind of a bit in shock when we sit down and they ask us to install this tool called Emacs and find all of the keyboard shortcuts, muscle memory that we've developed over the years of our using other development tools were no help. So we kind of started scratching at the surface of, is there a different way to do this? So we ended up kind of sort of reverse engineering how to communicate with the compiler, and that was kind of the first version of the VS Code extension that was created by me and my team. And over the years, we'd made enhancements to it, but as our offering inside of CT has grown larger, my ability to continue adding features and enhancing the VS Code integration that I created has become less and less as I don't have time to manage that anymore. So then when I heard rumors earlier this year that there may be official support coming from Configura for VS Code, I got really excited about this and started poking all of the right people at Configura to find out more about this. I think Adam got really tired of my messages asking how long until I could try this thing out, but then here we are. Today we're kind of officially talking about the official VS Code integration from Configura. So what I want to do is kind of walk through what is VS Code for some people that may not be familiar with this, especially if we've got some people that have been, maybe straight out of college, come into CET development, things like that, that maybe not use this tool. So Visual Studio Code is an IDE created by Microsoft. It has a giant extension ecosystem that allows extreme customization of the tool, language support, things like that. It's very customizable. You can really make it look how you want and behave how you want for the most part. And then it is for the most part it is open source, but there are some specific bits that get put into the build when Microsoft creates their actual released Visual Studio Code version. They add in some telemetry stuff, things like that that are proprietary. There is a truly open source version called VS Codium that will also work, and I know some of the folks at Configura use that tool instead of Visual Studio Code. So next I want to walk through the different parts of the editor. So again, here I've got a pretty simple Visual Studio window here, kind of what you might see similar to when you first install the application and open it up. So first we've got the file menus up here at the top. Those which typical most applications. There's a lot of actions that you can do from up there. And then along the side of the window here, down the left side of the window by default is called the activity bar. So this kind of helps you hop between a few different areas of the application. And we'll go into some more details about those in a little bit. But I think the probably most important tool here is at the top is what I call the search or command box. I think it might have a more proper name, but that's what I call it. So really what you can do is you can click to interact with this and do just about anything that any action you want to do within Visual Studio Code, you can click in here and get there very quickly. In the middle area here is just kind of your active text editors. So you can kind of slice and dice that just like you can in Emacs, vertical splits, horizontal splits, things like that, to be able to look at multiple code files at once. It also supports tabs, so that each of those editors, you might have tabs open. So I think that makes it, especially coming from a background that's not Emacs based, I think that is very helpful for people like that. That's how most code editors kind of work. And then down at the bottom here, we have the bottom panel, which is another place where there are just different windows that provide information. You have a terminal or command prompt that's down there. There's the debug console, which doesn't get used in this integration, but if you were using tools like Node.js or C#, .NET, things like that, that's the window that gets usually utilized when you start a debug session for the output of that application. There's an output panel, which is not used by the Configura VS Code integration. This is what was used if you have used my integration before. That's where you'd see the output from the compiler normally in my version of the VS Code extension. And then there's the problems pane, which is kind of shows you as you compile, the extension will find errors and then it'll stick those errors in there for you to look at, so you can kind of quickly at a glance see where those errors are without having to necessarily scroll through the compiler output. And then lastly, there is the status bar along the bottom. So a lot of extensions will put kind of glanceable information down here. So you might see various things like the number of compile errors or warnings that you have. If you have some Git extensions installed, sometimes it might show some Git blame information down there for the current line, things like that. But there's a lot of different little glanceable bits of information that are down there. So with that, I kind of want to dive into the parts. We talked about that activity bar. I want to dive into the parts of that activity bar that kind of come out of the box. Just kind of give a little bit more detail into what those are. So the Explorer tab has essentially kind of three sections to it. There's the main Explorer tab, which essentially shows the file directory that you have open within VS Code or your workspace, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later once we dive into it. But it basically just gives you like your files to be able to explore and find. There's the outline view, which is down there kind of towards the bottom, collapsed a little bit, and that will provide an outline of the code for the current file that you're looking at. So think of like kind of like a tree structure. So it would show like the class, and then you could expand the class and see your fields and methods that are about that class to kind of just give you that high level tree view if you want to look at it that way. And then there is underneath of that, which is not in the screenshot, there's an active packages section, which is a CM specific thing that was added with the Configura integration. And that shows you essentially which packages are actively loaded by the compiler, which can be pretty handy, as I'm sure some of us have had had this experience where you're trying to navigate to a specific piece of code or something like that from the compiler if you're an Emacs person using Alt-I, and then it says no definition found, and then come to find out that the package that's referenced in hasn't been loaded yet, so the compiler isn't aware of it. So it's just kind of a nice piece of information that they added there. The next tab that we'll talk about is the search activity tab. So really what this does is it lets you search within your current folder that you have opened or Visual Studio workspace for files. It's got tons of options for filtering, searching. You can, set it to work on word matches. You can even go crazy and use regex if that's how your day is going. And every time I think about regex, I always think of this great XKCD comic. So where it's just saying that you use regex to solve your problems and you create more problems than you solve. But anyways, the next probably other big important section of the activity bar is the source control panel. The source control panel is where you can do all of your source control or specifically Git activities, especially for us in the world of CET. So you can use it to show the files that you've changed inside of your active VS Code workspace. And then clicking on those files, you can actually see that it'll show a diff of the file right there inside of VS Code. So like here you can see, for example, I changed this one line here, changed the class to go from compass platform part to go to part, for example. So you kind of review those changes before you commit them. And then you can also use the editor. You can select which files you actually want to commit there to stage them, and then you can put your commit message in there and do that all from within Visual Studio Code if you're not a command line junkie like some of us. And then the last kind of big activity bar section we're going to talk about is the extensions tab. So this is where you can go in and browse the VS Code Marketplace for various extensions. You can also manage the extensions that you have installed, so where you can disable them or uninstall them, or depending on how you want to set things up, you may set up specific VS Code workspaces to load some extensions and not other extensions. So that's where you kind of have a lot of freedom to customize and browse and see what's out there. So next, I want to show some quick functionalities that I think are pretty useful inside of Visual Studio Code, just shortcuts, things like that I use pretty much every day when I'm in there. So I just want to make sure to share those, kind of give you guys an idea of how I work in the tool. And then you'll see me using some of these things as we get into the demo a little later on, just so that you're kind of aware of what I'm doing and what I'm doing and how to do those things. So the first one is when I talked about that search box up at the top, is there is a shortcut to interact with that, and that is using Control-Shift-P. So then that'll just bring your cursor up there, so you can hit Control-Shift-P and start typing for what you want. So when you do that, you can find any command that is runnable within VS Code. So in the case here of this animation, I'm starting the CM compiler by doing this. Instead of using the hotkeys, I'm running the command to start that. And then you can see here that it switches the terminal pane to that, and then goes ahead and starts the compiler. The next one is, I call it the cycle editors. So if you can see here, I have a bunch of tabs open, and then by using Control Tab, I'll get a list of the editors that are open, and then I can kind of cycle through those by holding down Control and continuing to hit Tab until I find the one that I want to jump to. So it's kind of handy, especially if sometimes you get a lot of editors open and forget to close them, which happens to me quite often. Or when you're digging through some code and you end up about 15 layers deep and trying to kind of maybe get back to a specific file. Another useful one that I use all the time is what I call document symbol search. So by hitting Control Shift O, it'll bring you up to the top there, and you can then start to type the name of a method, property, field, class that's contained in the current file that you're looking at, and this will filter the symbols that are found in that file for the name that you're typing. So in this case here, I'm on the snapcm class, and I wanted to go to the connection method. So then I just typed Control Shift O, started typing connection, and then once I got the selection that I wanted in that dropdown, just hit enter, and then it jumps the editor right to that location. So this is really good because obviously you can search in the file, but sometimes you might be searching for something that's going to be there a lot, or they're like, if you're looking for like snap or connect methods, those can obviously pretty common variable name to use inside of a snapper. You doing just a simple search, you may have to jump through 15, 20 locations before you actually get to the method definition if that's where you're trying to go. So this is really handy to get around the file quickly. And then probably one that's really important is the go to definition. Analogous in Emacs would be using Alt-I. So you drop your cursor on something that you want to go see where that's defined at, and then you just hit F12 on the keyboard, and then it will jump the editor to the definition of the symbol that your cursor is sitting on. So in here, I'm sitting on Model 3D Snapper, hit F12, and then it takes me to the Model 3D Snapper file class definition. Then kind of the opposite of that is find uses interaction. So as you can see here, I'm sitting on Model 3D Snapper, and then I use Shift F12 to show where this class is actually being referenced and used. Keep in mind, again, just with most things with the compiler, is if you're asking the compiler questions, it's only going to answer with things that it's aware of. So it's only going to give you places that this is used in packages that it has compiled. So this is where you can utilize that active packages section of the Explorer if you wanted to see what was in there. Because let's say if I had my Contoso, to use a Microsoft name example, extension that was not compiled or loaded yet, that did inherit from Model 3D Snapper, this will not show that until you have actually compiled that package so that the compiler is aware of that usage of it. So then obviously after using all these commands to jump around in the editor, VS Code has a nice handy way to jump forward and backwards, kind of like you think about using your browser, right? You go forward a page or go back a page, and you want to go forward again. So you can use the Alt left and right arrows to jump forward and backwards respectively. So right jumps you backwards, left jumps you forward. So if you use go to definition to find out something's at and you're like, oh no, I don't want to be there, you can just quickly hit Alt left to jump back. So with all of that, I think it's time to let's take a look at this thing here, and let's dive into the VS Code editor and see how it works. So here we are inside of Visual Studio Code. So the first thing I want to point out is I've already gone through the work of installing the Visual Studio Code integration. As of the time of this recording, I'm not 100% sure how they plan to distribute that out to people that want to use it. I have not covered how to install that particularly for that reason. So I just want to make sure I'm not communicating something that may become out of date. So one of the things I want to do first is just do a quick overview again of the sections of Visual Studio Code. So first off at the top here, if I draw the arrow the correct direction, we have the search box or Omnibox, whatever you want to call it. So this is kind of helps you do just about anything you want inside of Visual Studio Code. So this thing is pretty cool. And I'll kind of show that in a minute. And then one of the other things that's obviously very important is the file menu, which gives you access to some great things like save, open, close, all those goodies. Also lets you change some settings of Visual Studio. Then over here we have the activity bar. And you may, inside of your Visual Studio Code, when you first open it, if you haven't used it before, you may see you don't have as many icons as me, and that's because extensions that you have installed inside of VS Code can add icons to this to create their own views. So some of the extensions I have installed may have contributed some icons there that you may not have. Then down here at the bottom, we have the bottom pane, which houses a couple different things, but you can. The main things that we're going to worry about today are the problems and terminal pane for the most part to look at. So that's what those are. So first off, what I'm going to go ahead and do is walk through again these activity bar sections real quick. So on the Explorer section here is where we have kind of the tried and true File Explorer that shows the folder that you have open, or Visual Studio Code workspace. I'm going to try to keep comment when I talk about workspaces. I'm going to make sure that I clarify if I'm talking about a CM workspace or a Visual Studio Code workspace, because they are two different things. And I'll talk about workspaces a little bit more for Visual Studio Code in just a minute. But so this is just our File Explorer. We also have this outline pane here, which once you have a file open, if the language of the file that you have open supports it inside of Visual Studio Code, this will give you kind of a tree structure of the file to look at, and then we can look at that some more once we have some CM files open. The Timeline and Solution Explorer come from extensions that I have installed, so we're not going to worry about those. And then the active packages will show in a minute once we have some the CM compiler running and see what that guy does. Search box lets you do searching within the folder that you have open, so you can do a bunch of settings. You can use regular expressions. You can include, exclude files from your search, so it's pretty handy. Run and debug when you're using languages like .NET, debugging some Node.js, things like that. So that's kind of the debug view that'll get open to let you do some specific debugging tasks. And then there's finally the extensions pane, which this will show the extensions you have installed, and then it will also let you search the VS Code Marketplace to find new extensions to install. So you can install new ones, you can disable old ones, uninstall old ones that you don't like, etc. Again, like I said, the rest of these all come from extensions that I have installed that I have over time that I found useful. So we'll go ahead and drive back to the File Explorer for now. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and turn off this activity bar just to give us a little bit more space to look around here and make it easier to see some things. And then I'm going to go ahead and increase the zoom on VS Code here so it just gets a little bit easier for us to see everything. And then one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on screencast mode. So this will help you see the different keystrokes and clicks that I'm making. So to do that, just to show how this activity bar works here, or sorry, not activity bar, the search box at the top, if I click on the search box, this will show all the different kind of stuff that we can do. So in this case, we want to run a command. So we're going to say show and run commands, and then we're going to type in screencast mode. Some of you that are real quick to notice is see that that was already at the top. So this search box will kind of keep the commands that you ran most recently at the top, so that way you can rerun them again easier if you need to. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. And you'll see now that when I click my mouse, we get this nice red circle that shows that I clicked the mouse, and then as I click buttons on my keyboard, they will show up here. So even if I do key combinations, you'll see those. So hopefully that'll help people watching this or rewatching it maybe pick up some of the keyboard shortcuts that they might have not missed or understood, things like that. So one of the things first let's do is go ahead and explore what CM commands are available inside of VS Code. So we can either go up here and click on this search box and do that, but then we'll also notice that here the show and run commands has a shortcut that is Control-Shift-P. So what we can do is we can actually go ahead and do Control-Shift-P to open this, so we don't have to move our mouse up there. So depending on how you're working, if you got your hand on your mouse, maybe it's easier to click up there, but if you've got both your hands on your keyboard, then you can do it this way. One of the features of VS Code is extensions that contribute commands. It will prefix the command name with the extension that it comes from. So one of the cool things we can do then is we can type in CM : to find all of the commands that are contributed from the Configura VS Code integration here. So if we type that, we can just get a quick glance at kind of all the different features that are added in here of commands that you can run from CM. So one of the first things we want to do is start the compiler, right? So let's go ahead and change this query to say CM start. And when we look up here now, you'll see that we actually have two different start commands. We have the start compiler process and we have start CET designer. So I would just want to do a quick point of clarification because I think a lot of people aren't necessarily aware of how this works. When you start the compiler for CM, it runs the boot.cm file that is located in your user profile folder inside of your CM workspace. By default, that boot file contains a line of code that tells it to start CET Designer right away. So the reason I'm pointing this out is it takes a long time to boot CT Designer sometimes on dev, especially from a cold boot. So what I would like to point, so what I'm trying to point out here is if you go into your boot file, you can actually remove or comment out that line that starts CET Designer. So then you can actually utilize both of these two commands here that are available to start the compiler how you want to. So you can save yourself a lot of time by taking that out of there. So when you say, I want to start the compiler process, you can have the compiler up and running within seconds instead of having to wait for CET Designer to start itself if you're not actually going to be working inside of CET Designer at that moment. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that start compiler process one here. And then so now if you keep an eye on the terminal window down at the bottom here, oops, wrong shortcut, sorry. So if you keep an eye on this terminal window down here, you're going to see that as soon as, once I do that, we are going to see some great things happen. So we're going to say start compiler process, and you see now we're starting to see a lot of the same output that you're used to seeing in Emacs when you start the compiler, right? So that's awesome. So we've already got this up and running, minimal effort inside of VS Code. So if we want to stop the compiler, we can do the same thing. We can say cm stop compiler process, and then you'll see that it runs the stop command down there. Now, just a thing to note, you might see me sometimes when instead of doing Control-Shift-P to open the command palette, I may hit F1 because I also have it bound to that. So I just want to let you be aware of that if you see that come up sometimes. I don't know why. Sometimes I just use it depending on what I feel like using. It's just random. So you don't, and when you're searching, you don't necessarily have to always type in the CM start here. I can just go ahead and type in start. Obviously, I'm going to find a lot more things based on extensions I have installed, but VS Code, again, is going to surface those things that you've used recently to the top. So I can just type in start here and get there to get that if I want. I can also use the hotkeys that it shows here for these commands. So this is kind of nice to learn the hotkeys of these commands. So if you wanted to start the compiler process, I could use Alt-C, Alt-O. So if I go ahead and hit Alt-C, Alt-O, apparently not. Oh, I know why that is. I have to be inside of a CM file, I believe, for that to be invoked. So apologies. So we'll start the compiler process this way for now. And so let's go ahead and create a CM file. So I'm going to create in this conference 2023 folder inside of my profile, and let's just call this sample1.cm. Oh, it's telling me a file already exists. Sorry, let me clear this out. Apologies. Just so we get the full experience here. So sample1.cm. So this is an issue I've kind of already brought up to the Configura team, is that it's kind of not helpful when you create a new CM file that you just get a blank file, like nothing in it. You don't get the copyright. There's no nothing. There's no even just like empty block for you to write code in. So one of the things that I've done over the years is I've actually created a whole lot of snippets for VS Code. So these are things that you can do to go ahead and make it easier to do different things. Like if you have a specific piece of code that you write a lot, you can create a snippet for that. But so what I have created is I've created a file snippet. So if I go ahead and hit F1 and type fill file with snippet, I've created this class file definition for the CM language. So if I go ahead and hit that, it's going to drop in that whole snippet for me. So you can see here, this brought in the copyright warning, or whatever you want to call that. It pre-filled the package with the folder, the actual path to my package for me, so I didn't have to do that. And then since I picked the class snippet, it assumed that I wanted to create a class, and it automatically defaulted the class name to match the file name and put in a blank constructor here for me. So just kind of a little time saver. I think a lot of these snippets I will probably be sharing with Configura as well, for them to probably just add these directly to be shipped with the VS Code extension. So that way, everybody kind of benefits from that. So now that we have a simple file here set up, let's go ahead and create, just as an example, let's make a simple snapper. So let's go ahead and extend model 3D snapper. And you'll see that sometimes there's a lot of noise that kind of pops up down here. This is in the compiler. This is another thing that I've communicated with Configure about a little bit, to say, maybe we need to find a way to kind of fine tune that, or maybe have some of that noise go somewhere else, because us as consumers of the compiler, a lot of this information is not helpful to us. It's just noise. It just gets in the way. So anyways, let's go ahead and keep working on creating our first snapper here. So let's add some fields to this. So again, I have another snippet that I've created here. So another way that you can invoke snippets is you can start to type the name of the snippet. So I created a snippet called prop that is to create a field or property on a class. So I just get to this point, and then I can just hit tab, and then it'll insert the snippet. So then I can give it the type. So let's just give this a double and width and call it width for this thing. And then if I tab out again, it's going to take me to the end of the snippet. So I could go ahead and repeat that again to add another width that's the, or not width, sorry, another field that's the height, and then do it one more time. That will tell us that we have the width, height, and depth. Those are the three measurements that typically a snapper might have. So another thing we probably, apologies, had to cough. Another thing we need to do here is maybe add a method to set up our snapper, right? So let's create a new method here. If I can type extend public void setup snapper. And normally when I'm doing these code demonstrations, I'd have them prepared, but I feel like kind of seeing the VS Code CM integration in action is kind of helpful and kind of part of what my extension's about. So or not extension, sorry, part of what this presentation is about. So apologies, sometimes the typing's a little boring. So here, let's say we just want to set some default values for these fields, for lack of a better term. So first thing you want to do is sometimes it helps to make sure that your code can compile to make sure that you're getting all the benefits of the VS Code integration. So I'm going to go ahead and do the usual Control-Alt-U to compile my file. And we can see that we got the tried and true down here that says, hey, your file compiled, so great. Just to make sure that the compiler kind of has the best information about our file. This isn't necessarily always needed, but I've just found that helps sometimes. So let's go ahead and set some fields on our thing here. So let's go ahead and set the width. One of the things you'll see here with the autocomplete or IntelliSense is sometimes it when you first start to type, it picks up so much stuff that it doesn't quite get everything. So sometimes I found that once you've typed a couple letters, so let's say we go back to this WID, is if I hit escape and then re-invoke the autocomplete with control space, that I will get better help from that. I don't know if that's just because it hits a limit or what. It's just something new I kind of discovered as I was recording this. So that's probably something also I'm going to report to Configura. But so you can see here is then we start to get information about these fields, not only what fields are available, but also their types and the packages that they came from. So I can go ahead and hit tab or enter to select that choice if I want, and then set a value to this. And then we can do the same thing for some of the other fields. So you can see there, actually this time it kind of refreshed for me, so it's kind of been inconsistent for me a little bit. But so here I want to set the depth to be 10 inches, and then let's go ahead and also set the height as well. So hit escape, hit control spacebar to re-invoke that, and there we go. So you'll see that this also works, this IntelliSense also works for when we want to call methods about our class. So let's say now in the constructor we want to call this setup snapper method. We can go ahead and say this.setup snapper, and you'll see here that this is coming in right here. So I can go ahead and select that and have that be called. We can also use this IntelliSense when we're trying to override methods from our base class. So this experience could be better. This is something that I've again reported to Configura. Hopefully this will get better quicker because I think it's a pretty easy fix. But if we start to type the name of a method that we know exists in our base class, we can do like say we want to implement update connectors here, since this is coming off a snapper. You'll see that it does find the method, but the code snippet that is, or not snippet, sorry, the code completion that is provided doesn't really actually get us all the way there. And I don't know if it's because this was designed for you to automatically type the public void or public return type, then method name. But sometimes I don't always know the return type of the methods that I'm trying to implement. So I think that would be kind of nice if the thing here would actually bring in all of the different fields for that. Or sorry, not fields, all the different keywords and stuff to do that for you. So you can do that. The other thing that's kind of a little bit of a pain about that is if the method does have a return type, is that the snippet that it will actually suggest is not completely accurate, because it'll give you that same snippet again where it will just call super, or it would be much better if it would call return super. So that way the code that it drops in at least compiles to begin with. And then again, you can also get IntelliSense from methods in the base class, etc. too. So if we implement dropped here for this to make this at least look like a real snippet of code here, if we do this dot width equals 15 inches, then we can also do like this dot invalidate, and then we can get all we've got all our great invalidate methods here. So we can call invalidated, we can call invalidate 2D. Oops, I can't spell. That's why. It's like, why isn't it finding that? So we can call invalidate 2D as well as this dot invalidate 3D. And then again, it's cool because it shows you the parameters that go with that method when you're doing that. So that's kind of the first little preview of the integration that I wanted to show. And again, if we do Control Alt U, we'll get the compiler action here. So you can see here that we actually had a problem. So if we go to the problem pane, you'll see that it says, hey, the statement has no side effect. So you can see that from the terminal pane, we get these here, but then this problem pane is actually going to take all those problems that the output spits, drop them in here for a nice to browse list. So that I can just click on this and it's going to take me right to the line that has the problem. So in this case, I forgot to add the semicolon on the end of my line. So I'll just go ahead and do that, recompile the file, and then you can see that that problem goes away. So one of the Explorer panes that we talked about, if we collapse this, was this active packages. So if we open this, this is going to show you all of the packages that are currently active. And I haven't honestly experimented with this much, but I know that this can be interesting when you start to ask the compiler things such as like a go to definition, stuff like that. It may tell you, hey, I don't know what that is, but sometimes it's not actually because it doesn't know what it is, it's just because that package hasn't been loaded yet. And then the outline, you'll see here that this gives me the tree structure of my code file. So I've got a class that's sample, it's got these 3 fields, it's got this constructor and these methods. So it's kind of a great way that you can hop around quickly to those files, those fields, or methods. So one of the next things that I want to show is if we hop over to a new file. So if we go back up here, I kind of put this file together to have a couple different things to showcase about the new system here. So one of the first things you'll see here is if we start to use our mouse to just hover over stuff. So let me bring this back to the terminal just to make sure if we have any problems, we see those, is that we can start to mouse over variables and then we will get tooltips about those variables once we've compiled the file. So if we go ahead and compile this file, and then I'm going to clear my console. You'll see me do that. It's muscle memory. I apologize. You'll see that I can hover over some of this stuff, and then I can see that get a report here that, hey, this is a method here. So I can see that this is a method that returns a Boolean. So that's kind of actually really cool, because if that's coming from a different package or it's not something you're familiar with, you don't have to jump to that thing anymore. You don't have to leave your current context to see what things are. One of the places that I think that is super awesome and helpful is there's this, I'm going to say air quote, lovely feature of CM where when you're calling a method that takes no parameters, you can leave the parentheses off. I hate that with every fiber of my being because it makes the code hard to read because you don't know anymore if you're calling a property or a method when you're accessing something. So as an example here in this person class, I have this field that is called dead because it's a person, and then I have a method that is alive that takes no parameters. So if we're looking at this code here in this getAge method, you'll see that I do this.isAlive. So I don't know by reading this code, if I wasn't familiar with this class or the class is much longer, what the heck that thing is. So I can actually just now hover over that and I can quickly see, hey, that's a method. And then I can hover over dead and see that that's a property. So I think that's pretty cool that you don't have to hop around to see that anymore. So I think that's a super cool feature of this. That's something kind of new. One of the things you'll notice as you kind of look at this is I know that Configura is still working on some of the syntax highlighting, so there's some places that this could be getting better, and I know that they're kind of working on that, and I know that from personal experience that's a big thing to tackle to make sure everything's working great. So hopefully that'll just get better over time. So you may notice that in some of these code samples that some things are not colored like you think they should be. So I just want to point that out. And then pretty much that's shows some of the main things of CET that you can do inside of CM. So we still got all the great stuff like here. So if I take this file, compile it, again, sorry, I have muscle memory to clear my console, so I apologize for that. If I run this file here, you see, boom, it did everything that we expected it to, right? It went ahead and printed all of these different plins out, did various stuff, so that's pretty cool. So we even have the fancy, if you guys utilize these, coloring of the output, that works here. So that is awesome and great. So they're super good. One of the things apologies. One of the cool new features that I want to talk about, though, that I think I'm super excited about, is that they have added the ability to debug CM code. I'm just going to let that sit in your brain for a minute. Is we can now have official debugger support for CM code inside of Visual Studio Code. So right now, to do this, I have to kind of run this bit of code to turn on the debugger. So I'm going to go ahead and run this file here so then you can see that it's done some stuff to set up the debugger. And now if I come back to this file here and then I run the CM command to attach the CM debugger to the process, you'll see here now we get this bar up here at the top that shows, hey, we're debugging. Is now I can go ahead and drop a breakpoint in this file, just like you would any other language. And then if I go ahead and run this, you'll see here that this actually stopped at this line. It has no longer executing the code. So then if I go to my debug window here, you'll see here that we're stopped. We've got a call stack in this pane here that shows us the call stack. We can use F10 to, sorry, it looks like there was a little glitch there. F10, which gets us here. So now we can see here's our local variables. The watch pane does not work, and I've been told that that's very tricky to implement, and they're not sure if they would ever actually be able to implement that. But the variables window here shows you your local variables, which is really awesome, so you can kind of see what the values of those are. I'm hoping that in the future they'll make some of these complex types be able to be expanded to look at so that I could actually see here this person class without hovering. If I have a lot of fields or something like that, I would be able to kind of explore that easier without having to look at the tooltip. But we get full debugger support though, like what you'd expect. So I can use F10 to kind of continue on here to step line by line through my code, which I think this gets me so excited I can't even explain how excited I am for this. So I think that this is amazing. So this works in any file that I've tried it so far. It works when you're doing actions with snappers, all that good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and hit F5 here to continue until the next breakpoint, which I didn't have any more breakpoints, so that's going to go ahead and stop. One of the things that I want to point out, though, is sometimes in CM we have methods that get called a lot, right? So you're doing stuff with connectors or things like that. So sometimes dropping a breakpoint in there may not be useful. Same thing as with dropping plins, right? A lot of the times if you're checking for a certain condition or something like that, you want to only stop at that point. So one of the cool things that you can do is they also added a special command, which something like this exists in JavaScript, where it's a piece of code that you can put in to actually force a breakpoint. So what you can actually do is, let's say we have a problem that when I is 5, we have something weird going on. So then we can actually add this code here called a debug break. So I don't have any breakpoints in my file right now, but I can go ahead and then run this file, and then as soon as it hits this line of code, it's going to stop the compiler. So you can see here it actually outputted 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then stopped. And then if I run this again, it's not going to stop at it again because that condition is only true one time, so this line of code is only hit once. So I think that's a great way that you can maybe utilize almost kind of like a conditional breakpoint, that if there's certain conditions that you want to be true for your breakpoint to hit, that then you can kind of look at some stuff, see what's happening, or follow the flow of the code. Okay. So that's most of what the stuff I wanted to show. A lot of the things that you're used to, from within CET, right? Like alt-click, things that open Emacs from VS Code when you're looking at source code, all of those things still work. So that's great. So I think that's kind of the quick overview of the VS Code extension that I wanted to show you guys. So let me hop back to PowerPoint here and we'll wrap this presentation up. All right, here we are back in PowerPoint. So I just kind of want to do a few things to kind of wrap up. So there's a few, I think few hiccups kind of to go through yet that I've found. And one of them, these are things that I've dealt with for a long time. And so one of the featured things is that by default, when you're holding the control key and your mouse is over a piece of code, that automatically invokes some actions inside of VS Code. And so it's kind of a pain in the butt. I've worked around that personally by swapping the Alt and Control behavior inside of VS Code for the mouse events. But I know it's something that I've mentioned to Configura about because the compiler can get pretty angry if things don't compile. So I've seen that like a lot of times if you're just pasting code by pushing like Control V or copying code and your mouse is over a specific thing, sometimes that can cause some weird behavior. Um, and as you saw too in the demo, the debugger step behavior sometimes is a little weird. Is that if you have kind of some things that might be considered multiple lines of code or multiple methods calls on a single line, something like that, is it can act a little weird that you might have to hit F10 multiple times to actually progress to the next line of code. So there's just some things that I've discovered there. And one of the things that I think is probably going to be the most powerful with debugging is using the debugger to follow the flow of the code. Because sometimes, especially inside of CET, there's lots of moving parts. And so I think sometimes you end up in a method, kind of like this one that I've got here on the screen with the connect line to lines. And if you're trying to figure out where your code is actually going on a specific time, it can be a huge pain. So this is where I think debugging could be huge, is that you could just drop a breakpoint in here and walk a line by line to see which if else case you're ending up in that's actually being executed, because maybe you've got a bug in a certain condition and you're not sure which of these that is happening. So instead of having to print out all of these variables to figure out where you're ending up, you can just debug, which I think is great. It's a different way to work. It's just another tool in your tool belt. So I think that's one case I wanted to point out, that I think that this is where this will be really powerful. Another great case for this, I think, is not having to recompile your files just to put in some debug information. So a lot of the times when you're like, okay, I know that the code is getting here, but I don't know how it's getting here. So the first thing we do, what do? We put a new line at the top of that method, add an SSD, a USD, a plin, something like that, to check to see if the code is reaching that point and how it got there. Well, now with this, you can do that same thing. You just drop a breakpoint at the beginning of that method, and then once it hits that, you can inspect the stack, which is great, because sometimes if you're working in large files, like I did a test on my machine earlier, that if I was working in snapper.cm, if I'd make a change to that file and have to recompile it, it takes 5 to 10 seconds for that file to recompile for me sometimes, maybe even more, depending on, if IT thinks I need to run a virus scan at that point in time. But with adding breakpoints, there's no recompile necessary. You just drop the breakpoint in there, and then it's just going to hit it the next time. So I think that that's another case where this could be really powerful. There's still a few things that I think need to be enhanced to make this kind of the level that I think it should be. But again, this is my personal opinion, so I'm just going to share things that I think need to be happening. And so again, one of the things I think is file templates. So like we saw when I created that new CM file, it just came in blank. I think that that's something that is pretty easy, low-hanging fruit to take care of. Another thing is I think they need some commands inside of VS Code to explore the file folder that you have open, and then maybe compile specific extensions, because sometimes it's really nice to just be like, okay, I want to compile just my whole extension and make sure it compiles. Another thing that I think would be really handy is if you're moving files between folders. So if I have, my extension dot helpers folder, and I'm like, oh nope, I really want this at the top level, and I drag the file up one folder. It'd be great if that package reference inside of the file just auto updated to the location that you moved it to, because the package reference has to match the folder structure. So you can't have those. It has to match. So I think it should be a nice quality of life thing. One of the things I talked about in the demo, the overriding methods autocomplete. If it would give code that would compile right away, that would be much better. When you're doing the document symbol search via Control-Shift-O, in some files it is incomplete. So a big example of that is if you go into snapper.cm and run that, you'll see that it doesn't actually give you all of the methods that are and properties that are in that class. So that's, again, something that I've reported to Configura. And then another one that I talked about is it'd be great in the local variable section while debugging if you could expand collapse complex types to be able to look at those instead of just staring at the tooltip. I also did find that when you're debugging, if you have methods marked as inline and drop a breakpoint in those methods, they're not actually hit. And I again have no idea how complicated it is for those to be added or removed, or I'm sorry, be implemented by Configura. But I think that would be something that if they could take care of, that would be awesome. And like I said, code snippets. I think that those are the mega time saver. So some things that I think that would be pretty cool to add. And again, some of these come from if some of you have used the version of VS Code extension CM integration that was created by me. Some of these things are in there. So I have a feature called user snippets. And so what that actually does is it allows you to create just little functions, CM functions, and then you can run a command inside of VS Code, and it finds those functions that you've created so that you can just run them at any time from anywhere. So I have some to like refresh the drawing, rebuild all snappers, stuff like that, so that you don't have to go to a specific file and run that command. You can just invoke it directly from VS Code. Another one I think would be to reload RS files automatically. So as soon as an RS file gets saved, it would be great if like the database, the RS database, would just automatically rebuild with those new changes, so that they're just reflected right away inside of CM, or I'm sorry, not CM, CET. Um, the there's a few times where you'll see that stuff that gets outputted in the terminal isn't clickable, or doesn't quite take you all the way to where it is. It might say that it happened on snapper.cm at line 35, but the format that gets outputted by the CM compiler isn't understood by default by the terminal in VS Code. So it's a simple thing that they can actually do. And again, this is something I communicated with Configura about, that they can add support to identify those different format links so that VS Code can understand them. Another one would be the workspace symbol search. So I think if this could be implemented, this would be amazing too. So this essentially just allow you to query the compiler for any symbol that it knows about at any time. So if you know I want to go to the snapper class, you could just hit Control T, type snapper, and then you could actually see all the stuff that is snapper, and then you could jump specifically to that class definition. Another just simple thing would be file type icons. I think it'd be great if they'd had those for RS and CM files. And then I think one thing that would be really cool would be to, like a lot of languages have, to have a code action to auto bring in any using statements that you might need for missing packages. Because it happens to me all the time, right? You write a piece of code, and then it tells you, I don't know what grect is. And then you have to go find what package that's referenced in, because I don't ever remember what package that's in, and then add that using statement to your package.cm. So I think it'd be cool if there's a thing that it could auto-identify those and then give you the choice of where you'd want to pull those classes in from. So to wrap things up here, essentially, I've been told that the VS Code extension will be open source. So the community will be able to help drive development of this if they wish. And I think that this is huge, because really this just gives us more ways to work. I think it really opens up the CM community to newer developers, especially as developers come from other technologies, what happened with us at HNI is, us coming from a background of web development using other tools, they're going to be a lot less resistance to coming to this platform, because they'll be able to use tools that they're more familiar with. And again, my name is Tyler Lamb, work for HNI. And if you have any questions, concerns, feel free to shoot me a note. I may not have the answers to all the questions, as again, this is Configura's development, this extension, not mine. So I may have to reach out to them for questions as well, but I'm happy to help us learn more and kind of continue on this journey in CET. So thanks, everyone.